This podcast is brought to you by Squarespace. All right, guys, we are back with another episode of the Brooklyn PhotoWorks ISO 320 podcast. And today is an awesome day because we have our new friend, Doug Menuez, on here. And I probably just butchered your last name because I don't think I've ever heard it said. So forgive me.
That's all right. It's half the family says Menuez. The other half is Menuez. Menuez is where I'm coming. My side is
from so Ohio. Should I say Menuez?
Menuez.
Menuez. So the Z is like silent.
Yes.
Doug Menuez. Now Doug is he's a visual storyteller. If you look at his website, which I suggest you do right now, or jump onto his Instagram feed right now, this minute, because you want to follow along with his work because the work just speaks for itself. In fact, it's more interesting than listening to me, I'm sure. I met him briefly at a like event at Photoville this summer. And, back when we actually got together in groups and went on photo walks with hundreds of people, which is hard to even conceive right now. And we stayed friends on Instagram and then yada, yada, here he is. And it is such an incredible treat to have him here on our podcast today. So here you go. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Adam and Daniel, for having me. I was really excited when I saw you guys reaching out, and I'm just loving this pre-pod talk that we've been having and catching up on how much we all have in common. It's really fun. I love it. The new Zoom world.
It is. It's interesting because in the pre-pod talk, which we try to keep to a minimum because it often just takes off.
For this exact reason.
But the interesting thing that we touched on is that, we're all musicians, and I can't even tell you that I don't think we've had a photographer on here that isn't a musician of some sort, whether they were professional or not. I think I've always felt, and I don't want to take up too much time because we're really here for you, my friend. but I started playing music at an early age, and I went back and forth, and I studied photography, and then I decided to pursue music. But once I really started getting into photography and really kind of learning about light, I really saw this incredible correlation that light and sound have the same properties. They work in the same fashion, So if you have a percussive sound or you have a big flash of light and, it's loud, but the fall off is so quick and so many different things. So the language, my first language, I guess, is music, but in kind of translating to light, it's almost interchangeable. And maybe that's why the two work together in that respect, just on a mechanical level.
Well, I think the way your brain perceives information, first of all, we know the first thing that happens that you perceive is sound, and then light. And when you open your eyes, the first thing you see is upside down in black and white as your brain is processing fight or flight information. And then it turns to color and resolves, and your brain fills in all the detail. I was studying this when I was trying to figure out how visual memory worked, because there isn't really much science on forming and keeping visual memories and where that happens in the brain. At least there wasn't 10 years ago when I really dug into it. There's tons about memory formation. But this leads to the point of why I started looking into that is, why is still photography even a thing in this video age? Why does it even exist? And I think it's because it's the perfect data set for how we remember, but how we take on board information in terms of who we are, why are we here, who is our tribe, what do we relate to in the photograph, what do we learn from the photograph about our place in the world. And I think that's a useful thing that will never go away. But I also think I'll be proven right in 100 years that still image is the language of our memory. So in other words, if you think about a dream or a movie you saw and you think you're remembering the movie, what you're really remembering is the frame of the scene. And then you add another frame and another frame. It's just biology is exactly like what we're imitating in filmmaking. So I just think that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. So.
I love it. I think it's great. No, it's really true. When you kind of like dial back into your memory, you really do remember it in kind of still imagery. It's not really until you're dreaming that you're actually putting the sequences together. But when you're kind of extrapolating those memories, it's like you're really kind of looking at that one kind of still and then kind of building around it. So I dig it.
For me, growing up,
I'm with it.
Even today, like everything is so visual, and the only thing I heard growing up was, what kind of learning disability does he have? Let me test him for everything. And it came back with nothing. I always learned, and always, whether I'm learning how to make a table or play something on guitar, I would always watch and then get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it never connected to photography till many years later, but I've always seen things, not even one frame at a time, but almost in like in film, many frames put together. And so I know you do, work with film as well. And was that like has it always been, was a natural transition to sort of go from one frame and then having to stitch thousands of frames together and tell a story?
I've always felt very natural at it. I started learning filmmaking when I was 10. A friend of mine and my best friend at the time, took a class that they were offering at the high school for summer for kids to make stop action movies. So we went crazy with that. But then I really became obsessed with still photography at the same time. And I didn't officially go into directing all these years because I never felt that I'd figured out stills. I really wasn't ready to dedicate myself to directing. But I've directed over the years off and on. My first commercial I was asked to direct was actually in 1996, and it did well. It got in the one show, which was only the second time that Fallon McElligott had got in the one show. It was about kids with AIDS. But I didn't really pursue it. What's happening now is the last couple of years, people are asking me to direct more and more. And I just directed a short film about a 93-year-old monk reading from his best-selling book, Blessings, and it's sort of a meditation, and it's really doing well. And it's for a nonprofit foundation called gratefulness.org. It's called Blessings, and it's on YouTube. And that was so satisfying. And we did a long interview with him that's going to be released later. And we did a kind of narrative. But I've done a couple other films, short films for people. And on my advertising, they're asking me to do over-the-shoulder stuff. So I think, and I've been doing a doc for the last 3 years that's just probably never going to be finished. So the more I work with it, the more I feel natural at it. I've always felt like I had a natural affinity to be a director. And, the way I do my commercial work is exactly how a director would work. I create scenarios, I let the action unfold, and then I'm pretending not to shoot, or I'm waiting and watching, and then I'm stealing an actual real moment. Because, that's the merger of art and commerce for me. It has to be real, whether it's on a set or I'm on the street. So it's a kind of a evolution, and maybe later than I would have probably. I mean, if I was smart, I would have put out my reel a few years back. So I'm not that smart.
How hands-on are you with which cameras you're using, which lenses, lighting, when you're working with film?
With film, I prefer to be working with a trusted DP and shoot second camera myself, or B camera. So I like being informed and getting surprised and improved by a great DP, because I need to see with my eyes open what's happening and unfolding, so I can really detect micro emotion or whatever I'm trying to do. I also, I really feel like for some reason I can't stop shooting stills when I'm directing. And in some of my personal shorts, I've mixed together stills with motion, and I really enjoy those two things when they work together. So that's how I work. I'm pretty dependent on my DP, and happy about it.
I think that's
as it should be.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that in any kind of a collaboration, that if you surround yourself with people that are better than you,
yes,
even if they don't have the role, like I've hired assistants, because that were amazing photographers, but they just didn't have the work to be,
right.
lead photographers. But it didn't mean that I had any less respect for them. And, oftentimes, like even working, like they might come up with an idea or another way of seeing things. And I'm like, yeah, definitely.
Totally.
So
I think that's one of the things you learn early on, if you're paying attention, is that you come in with this idea.
Yeah.
And you fight to the death to make it happen, and everybody's burning out, and Rome is burning, and then you're just going to kill yourself, and you realize, just let it go.
Yeah.
Follow the muse, and that's being open to new stuff coming up, because you really are married to that idea, but you got to let go, and you got to be very open. I think that's an important thing to learn.
But it's so inspiring when your eyes get open and you're like, oh,
yeah,
yes, and that looks amazing, and then you add the salt and pepper on, and
yeah. No, that's the collaboration.
Yeah.
So what you're saying about coming with somebody who's got really sharp skills and respecting the collaborator that you've brought, they're an assistant maybe, but I think it's really important. A good idea can come from anywhere on that set,
Right.
even client, you know.
Sure.
And that's why I like commercial work, because when I'm shooting my personal work as a documentary photography, you're all alone, or filmmaker, you're all alone, and you're just trying to solve and get access and gain trust. And I love that too. I love solitude and that, but it's really nice to have that, you know, that the opportunity to come in and collaborate.
Well, I kind of attribute it to, you know, I've always been a band musician.
Right.
You know, even though like I'm perfectly capable of playing on my own and performing on my own and doing my own thing, I really thrive on playing with other people and you know, pulling things from them and getting inspired and getting pushed. So like that kind of interplay to me, I think translated also beautifully into working on set as well, working and collaborating with other people. And I enjoy the collaboration. Even if I'm just working with you, let's say I was just doing a portrait session with you, we are collaborating. You know, I might be directing a little bit more.
Now you're taking Doug's portrait?
Yeah. Yeah. I just put it up on Etsy.
Did you read his contract though?
Yeah. I only get 30%. It's fair.
Oh, wow. That's kind of shit, but you're old school. So, you know, I get it.
I fight for those rights, baby, all the way to my
you got to fight
copyright. Copyright matters. Thank you. Worked great for 200 years. Thank you, founding fathers.
Did you have a long span of time doing photojournalistic work prior to doing the commercial stuff? Because it really seems to be prevalent in the way that you capture the essence of people and their environment. There's something so, I mean, I don't even know if this is too simplistic, but like I look at your work and I just see life. There's life just kind of exuding from your imagery. And I love that. And I think that a lot of photographers that have that ability to translate that to commercial work really paid their dues doing the photojournalistic stuff, being able to see and capture it and show it.
Well, thank you for that. That's very nice, kind words. Yeah, I fucking paid my dues.
To put it
I did. No, I mean, I started when I was 14 and 15. I didn't know I was doing journalism. I wanted to be Cartier-Bresson. I was roaming the streets of New York or whatever I was doing. But
cool.
I started covering anti-war demonstrations, anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. And the local papers would see me and just grab my film because they didn't know if it was good, bad, but they needed something. So
right.
And then I was heading to art school. I did art school. I was in a commune in San Francisco. I was going to the Art Institute. I was going to be an artist. And this great photographer, Fran Ortiz, his wife kicked him out and he showed up in this commune. That's a whole nother story. It's so interesting. And he said, forget art school, kid. You got to come down to the Examiner and be a photojournalist and take my class at San Francisco State. So I did, which it became a kind of a noble calling. You know, you're willing to die to make a picture that can bring light to injustice, seriously. And my first mentor, the TA in the class, was killed in Jonestown. He was the photographer that was murdered in Jonestown. That was his first overseas assignment. He was 27. I went on to get the internship at the Washington Post, and then I wound up working for Time, Life, and Newsweek, and Fortune, and Forbes, and international magazines for 20 years at least. So I was published somewhere in the world every week for about 20 years. And when my son was born, I started to have this conflict and crisis about taking risks. I was covering stuff in Africa and famine and conflict, and I was covering the AIDS crisis, and I was covering the drug wars in Oakland and forest fires. I did a ton of forest fires and just stuff where you're at risk.
Yeah.
And that's when I also was doing this photo essay of Steve Jobs in Silicon Valley, which started for Life magazine, but it became a personal project. But it all came together when my son was born in '87, and I started rethinking. It took me about 5 years, well, more than that. About '94, the Rodney King riots, Newsweek called, and I said, no, I'm done. And that was my last photojournal. I mean, I still went and did photojournalism until I was shooting for Vanity Fair 2 years ago. So I still occasionally will do magazine work. But as a full-time photojournalist, I saw the commercial work that I was getting called to do because the culture was changing. It was aspirational in the 80s, advertising. Buy this Porsche and you can be cool. By the 90s, people had become more sophisticated and the audience wanted authenticity, and photojournalism was the only way to go. So I remember a creative director telling me, why would we hire you? You don't know anything about production. We'll hire an advertising photographer and tell him to shoot like you. And I just laughed and I thought, that's my opportunity.
Yeah.
You see so many pictures of a happy moment, but you can see the self-consciousness and the micro muscles around the eye. You can see the whole set in their eyes. You can see all those people staring at them. So I started to figure out how to bring what I had learned watching in the Amazon and waiting, getting trust of strangers in a strange land and gaining access and following how human behavior works. There's only like 6 or 7 things people do. So yeah, I also studied visual anthropology. So I really was into culture and human behavior and storytelling from that, capturing emotion and little intimate things. And I started to realize that in advertising, they didn't understand the mechanics. They knew the symbols. So when you look at most ads, it's symbolic of a happy moment.
Right.
It's symbolic, and we all take it as a metaphor, not a metaphor, but as a symbol of that emotion. We click, yeah, I see it. That's pretty well done. I'm trying to get to that deeper thing, and sometimes it might be considered boring because it may not be an exciting thing. It might just be this quiet interior thought process that you can sense that somebody's, so I probably lose a lot of projects because I don't have shit blowing up all the time, although I love that. But what you said, I had to address that. Sorry if I went on too long, but it really is what I'm after, is just the little tiny intimate things of real everyday life. And I try to create an opportunity on my sets when I do commercial work, that little tiny flower, that little miracle of reality to appear. And most production, almost everything on that set is designed to crush that moment that's going to happen, that fragment of reality. So that's why I might be talking to the creative director and letting the talent hang out there, and they're getting bored, and then they start doing shit that's great because they're not paying any attention, and that's my win right there. And nobody even knows I got it till later, and they're like, oh, when did you shoot that? But it's just a normal day in the life for any news photographer.
Right.
These are the training you get. Watch and wait, watch. And it's very zen. It's hours and hours in the pouring, freezing rain, waiting for that little thing to happen. Years and years of that. So yeah, I did benefit, and I do try to bring that in. I don't know that it's appreciated how hard it is. I don't think people realize how hard it is to get real moments. And there's so many talented photographers working though in advertising. So, my technique and my idea of being a director and bringing that is just a way to create a structure for moments to happen and guarantee something will happen. But I just think it's still not really well understood, because I hear a lot of people talking, creative directors especially, saying they really need authenticity. We need authenticity. And it's like they're having a hard time finding it. And that's what we live and breathe over here. It's like authenticity. I don't even want to say that word. What's another word for that? We're so tired of that word. Whatever.
Well, I think that everything kind of took that shift. I mean, I think even well, there's 2 things I wanted to touch on. Number one, I think most photographers that we've talked to, or all photographers we've talked to, that really create work that has real meaning and longevity, are the ones that take the time to get those shots. If we talk to a street photographer, fine art street photographer, it's not like he just woke up and just went click and went back to his apartment. He might have scoped that location, taken pictures of the location, looked at those sun chart things that you have on your phone, looked at the weather, and then camped out for 4 hours waiting for the light to be just right to get that one frame that's amazing. Just like another guy we talked to, he's an incredibly high-end architectural photographer. Same kind of deal. So I think being able to...
Sometimes you get really fucking lucky.
Yes.
Walk by somewhere.
No, you only do that.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
No, you know what? You can pay now or you can pay later, David.
Right.
But you're going to pay.
You're going to pay.
You spent 4 hours today, and then tomorrow you walk out of your place. Yeah. Boom! There it is. It's a gift right in front of you.
Right.
So it all balances out. But if you don't have a practice in street photography, that's basically walking for hours with nothing.
Right.
You're not going to get those lucky moments either. And you better fucking have your camera, because those fleeting opportunities
I can't leave my apartment without my camera. It's just it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Even if I'm going to a job, I'll just carry like a little M body and just have it
Right.
around my neck with my, DSLR and all that other shit, just because I know that there's stuff I'm going to want to shoot. And, if I'm going to the grocery store with my wife, I still am carrying a camera because I don't want to be without it. And I don't want to just be like, oh, I have my iPhone. Like,
But this has saved me a few times as it's gotten better. The
Yeah.
11, because
11
there
is
have
good.
my best shots though are all right here. They're all memories.
Yeah.
I didn't get to show.
Yeah.
Well, right now I'm just getting a lot of practice shooting my kids.
I
Yeah.
know, it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's the best thing.
I do it anyways, but
How many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids.
That you know of.
I can
That
do
I
it.
know. Well,
Okay.
that I know. Of.
Yeah,
True.
That's
True.
musician.
All right, I gotta go.
Phone's ringing.
Yeah, almost a 2-year-old and almost a 5-year-old.
Oh
So,
wow.
They're,
Wow.
just
Right
that.
on.
Yeah, right on.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, especially during these times. Yeah.
Yeah, surprisingly quiet over by you right now.
I'm
Like
not,
there's no
you
kids
wanna know?
screaming,
It's 'cause
no
the
dogs barking, and no
dogs are
construction.
the dogs are out being groomed. The kids are surprisingly quiet, and the construction is surprisingly quiet. So I'm enjoying this. This is a nice
Trifecta of
reprieve.
sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like the eclipse.
So Doug, obviously, you started shooting film,
I did.
and
I
then
did.
and then the industry strong-armed you and forced you to shoot digital.
It did.
And interestingly, I'm sure you know them as well. I know photographers that didn't make the transition. They couldn't hack it. They resisted. And then others that just did it and never looked back. So the question for you is, what was your kind of rig of choice when you were shooting film? And what did you get yourself into when you transitioned to digital?
Well, I was shooting originally. My dad gave me an Argus C3 rangefinder, and then I got a Nicormat, and then I got into the Nikon Fs, and that was it. And I couldn't afford a light meter though. By the time I got to the Washington Post, I had 2 Nikon Fs with no light meters, but I was shooting only triacs. So I could walk into a room and go, 60th at 2.8, let's go, 400 ISO, whatever. I could walk in and tell you the reading. That's what most photographers did then. Every
Right.
photographer I knew could do that. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't need a light meter. What will you need a light meter for? You got 9 steps of latitude. Anyway, I always got a few years in, my professional career, I finally got an M camera, and then I got an M6 in Hong Kong. David Kennerly made me, and J.P. Lafont made me buy it on Nathan Road at the Leica store in Hong Kong. We were there together, and they were talking about their Leicas, and Doug, which Leica do you have? And at the moment I didn't have one, and I said, I don't have one. And they were like, what? And they physically dragged me into the store, and I bought a 35 f2. Anyway, wherever I've gone through my career up until 3 years ago, I always had an M with me for street photography. If I was somewhere in Italy or in Russia or whatever, I would always walk around. If I was there on assignment for a magazine or I was there on assignment for a commercial shoot, I would always walk around and do some street. And
with your film, or did you then get a digital M to do that?
I got the M8 when it first came out because I was already doing digital by then.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent 15 years documenting the people who invented all this digital stuff and technology in Silicon Valley. And I was at Adobe where they were figuring out Photoshop. And I was with Effie Arazi when he invented color space. He said to me, he called me up and he said, I want to create color separation technology for any idiot. Come over quickly. Come over now. You're the idiot. So, color space. What? What's color space, man? Anyway, they would tell me, you're going to shoot digital someday. I'm like, bullshit, man. I will never shoot digital. But I started experimenting with digital printers at Effie. He created the Effie thing that worked with your computer. What's that called? What's that called? Anyway, I used to know all this stuff. But anyway, I started in the late 80s. I was working with dye sublimation printers. I had them in my studio, and I would start getting into digital printing very early. I had one of the first Epson printers. So digital was on my mind. I still never thought I would do a digital camera, but then I started using digital in the late 90s as our Polaroid. It became the best way to do Polaroid. and the quality was almost good enough to use. And then by the early 2000s, it was pretty close to good enough to turn in along with the film. And then by 2007, I shot my last roll of Tri-X with an M6 in Tokyo. And I had the M8, and then I got the Nikon D series of cameras for the commercial work, and I kept going with those Nikons. And they got better and better and better. And at a certain point, I realized this is so good. No one can, first of all, I was also pushing for emulsions. I was trying to get paper makers, and a whole generation grew up thinking that watercolor paper was photography. It's not photography. Polycontrast F, you know, that's photography. That's the emulsion that I grew up with. That's a different, it's a subtle nuanced thing, but it felt like you could just fall into that. Just so beautiful, the grayscale, so gorgeous. And I love Hahnemühle and all this watercolor paper, but as that became the thing, it's because no one could invent an emulsion for digital paper. No one could figure out how to do that with the same surface as the Barrett papers. It just could not be done. And then finally Innova came along. They had my photograph on their boxes, and then Epson, I think, bought them, but I started working on that. And I went full digital because it finally got to the point where no one could tell the difference. You could go to any expert and show them a print, which we did at Photokina. We showed thousands of people digital silver print, a silver print, and then the same image on an Innova Barrett paper that had an emulsion pretty close to polycontrast F. And I just felt like the tools got so easy to use. I went into a total digital world at that point. And I accepted it. And I also felt like if I breathed another fixer round in the darkroom, I would die. I became like allergic to it. So, you know what? We're polluting the earth, blah, blah, blah. Let's figure out how to make this just enough. I'm not a romantic about this stuff, guys. This is just tool. It's a hammer.
No, but for me, I'm romantic about it because I never did it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't grow up doing it. So
you're a millennial hipster. You can't help yourself.
I
Put
can't
on a
help
beaver
myself.
hat and go into your darkroom.
I salute you.
You know?
No, you know what? You know what, Daniel? I want to tell you something. What you're saying is really important because what came with film was this Zen discipline that we don't have in digital. So I made a mistake. When, around 2006, the great Magnum photographer, Dennis Stock, came over to my studio in Woodstock. And he's looking at my stuff. And, you know, Dennis was a curmudgeon, okay? But he basically said, you're losing it, kid. You're losing your edge. This digital thing is making you lazy. And he insulted me basically for half an hour. And the next day, or the day after that, I flew to Uganda to do a book about AIDS orphans. And I was so distraught and devastated by his critique. And I started to look at the stuff that he was talking about. And I realized I could be talking to you guys and shooting with all everything. You know, I wasn't paying it. It's so easy. There's no price for that, right? And in the old days, you start lifting a camera, you're thinking, I'm closing down, I'm stopping down, but it's so subconscious. So, you learn so much. With digital, you forget everything you learned about the discipline of the chemistry and the physics and the math of photography. So I really salute you for going and learning about film and stuff, because everybody today is really pretty lazy and the focus is in the middle and thousands and millions of photographs are being uploaded that all look the same because the robot is deciding everything about that depth of field, about those little things that artists would have chosen themselves based on trial and experience and their emotional proclivities. Anyway, what I did after I had that, I shot everything on manual in Africa. It was insane because I was out of practice. I shot prime lenses, manual focus, manual exposure, and I missed so many shots. And you're not going back, and you're never going to get those back, you know. But after like the second day, damn, it all came back, and I started nailing these pictures. Some of the best things I've shot in my life, and I was so proud that Dennis had kicked my ass to remind me about the practice and the discipline of photography and how important that was. Yes, you're not going to get everything, but what you get is going to be heart and soul and important.
Well, I mean, that's exactly why I basically only shoot M's professionally and personally. I had always, not always, when I really got into photography, I really got into Leica. I got the M9 and a 35 and a 75, 35 first. That was my entree into manual photography, that kind of stuff. I had my Nikons, then I dumped Nikons for Sony. Like you said, after a year and a half, sure, the first time I was shooting a wedding, and it's like, this is fucking easy. It's so fucking easy. It's just little square on the eyes, going back and forth.
You're getting winners all day long.
After a year and a half, I was like, I never touched my cameras unless I was working. And they just looked like computers to me and lost the heart and soul of photography for me.
There's a mystery of translating what's in you through that device.
It didn't speak to me. Fuji didn't speak to me. Tried that as well. But Leicas have like really spoken to me and helped me to take better photographs, even though you miss a lot more than you would otherwise.
Well, and you miss moments
exactly
too.
What you said.
But you learn to watch much more. You're watching. You
can watch with one eye.
That street photography class that you were on, that workshop we did, it was like Zen, and I don't know if I call it the same thing, but I used to do it always as Zen and street photography, because I was basically trying to get to, let's take the metaphors of film and apply them here. Don't look at your LCD. Who cares about, the technical issues? It's got so much latitude anyway. We'll fix it. Just, focus. Don't take your eye off what you're looking at to look at the camera. You just missed your Pulitzer, that kind of thing. And I use memory cards like rolls of film, which I started working out in the 2000s. So I prefer to use smaller memory cards. So it forces me to stop and reload. And I used to use memory cards that equal 36 frames. Now it's like, there's so
36,000 frames.
The files are so big. The files are so big, you can't do it. So
a month goes by, you're like, I'll just keep shooting.
Just little things like that, the way our naming system works. I've kept the metaphors of film to apply, so I keep my mind practice. The practice is top of mind, even though I'm shooting digital. So I feel like I've made a compromise, I'm not a compromise, but the best of both worlds.
That's awesome. I mean, I got into, so I started off shooting black and white film. I started with my dad's Pentax
320.
It was an Emmy Super, because he had to have, he was like a gadget guy, so instead of just like the standard, like, Pentax, whatever, it's the K1000, the Emmy Super was like a small version, it was like more compact. And I used that all through college, and, had my own darkroom and did that whole deal. And now it's like, and then I had like kind of a resurgence of kind of interest in shooting film in like the early 2010s, so from like around 2009 to around 2013, I ran a lot of rolls of film. But I'm like kind of on the fence about it as well. It's like, I love the look of film. I love the vibe of film. I've got like tons of amazing film cameras. Like half of them are loaded with film. Half of them, I don't even remember what I loaded into them, to be honest with you. But I do find that shooting with a digital rangefinder is like what you said. It forces you to slow down, to be a lot more thoughtful, to really kind of, be a lot more present for what you're doing, taking the time to really see and manually focus and really be kind of on it. I find that to be a far more zen than just picking up, a Canon, Nikon, Sony and just going click and being done.
And it's more rewarding. I think when I get a shot that I'm super happy with, I feel it feels better to me than using an auto. I mean, it sounds insane, but it has there's a better feeling that goes along with it. And I know, Doug, you're a huge fan of the SL. I saw that video when you were driving in your car, and you almost like ran off the road because you were talking about.
That was staged and directed. It was a joke, but somebody really hammered me hard online about it. How dare you? It's so dangerous. I'm like, this is funny. You can't have too much of a sense of humor. You can't really let it out.
No.
People take things way too serious.
But I do that. By the way, I do that all the time.
Who doesn't do it? I'm going across the bridge and I'm...
Hello? Yeah.
You're taking pictures. But that's pretty good acting.
Yes.
I believed it.
Yes, I used to work for some great directors I watched. You know, I was going to say the romance is important, and I have felt less and less romantic or in love with my cameras over the years. And the Nikon D5 is a tremendous machine. It was incredible. But I remember the first time we shot it on a FedEx shoot, I was just so frustrated. The files are so big. There's nothing can handle that. But also just, I couldn't figure out the menus. I have some learning disabilities, I know, because my son has, I know where he got them. And I just have a lot of issues with ADD. But I also just can't, under pressure on a shoot, I cannot go, where's that thing again? And I would hand it to my assistant, make it do that thing, you know? That's so frustrating and so horrible. And that is what I talk about. The first Leica video that I did, it's really from the heart, because I got the romance back with this SL largely because of the quality of the glass, but also because the user interface. Now, I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley watching these geniuses invent user interfaces that humans could use. It's very, very hard. And the Mac was the first real commercial available thing that used this, this metaphor for the desktop and all these icons and things that were just obvious to most people. And most people probably, I mean, there's three ways to learn: visual, kinetic, and sound. But you know, I think we're all visual learners. And so the menu means everything to me. And I bought a Sony when I was thinking about giving up Nikon. I also couldn't understand those menus. And then when they sent me the, yeah, and I keep changing them by accident. But then they sent me the SL, and it just was like, it was like such a relief. And I just felt so at one with this thing. I fell in love with it. And yes, it's larger than an M, but it's half the size of the Nikon or a Canon, or, you know, it's bigger than a Sony, but it's smaller than the others. And it's also mirrorless, but it came with these zooms that are heavy, but they're not longer than the Nikon zooms, except they are longer focal length. So you get 70 to 90, 90 to 280. That's like having a 300 in your hand. And I like zooms, especially when I'm doing a documentary project. I always have a prime camera though for certain things, but I really like zooms. Just gotten used to them. But these zooms, the quality is so good. They're like primes at every focal length. The bokeh is incredible. So I'm really happy with them. And I just got into the whole system. So that the first, or maybe the second video, I did talk about the user interface. Now the SL2 that came out, they changed the menus to match the M and the other one. So it's more unified and it's less easy for me, but I've adapted to it, and it's still easier than the others. It's still great, actually. But anyway, yeah. So I fell in love again, and then that's the weird thing. And I always say, you know, it's not the camera. We always say this is not the camera; it's the photographer's eye. But on the other hand, if the tool is really supporting you,
camera helps.
Hey, it can help you. You know, and I never felt that. I didn't feel that all these years. I always felt I was working against my equipment.
Have you ever?
I should have for what I used to shoot now, and I'm happier.
Yeah. Have you ever tried the CL?
Yeah, I have a CL. That's my main walk around now.
I fucking love that.
Yeah,
camera.
I do too.
It blew my, you know, I was trying Fuji's, the X Pro 3, the X Pro, all those T3, and
right.
the image, the quality just never stood up, especially the rest of my bodies were digital lens. I had the SL, the 24-90. I just never gelled with it personally. I'm not a big zoom guy, and that's a big fucking zoom.
Yeah.
You know, and like carrying around, I just never gelled with it. And then I picked up the CL. I traded it straight trade for the X Pro 3. And
at PhotoCare?
No, not a PhotoCare. What was it? Fred Miranda, one of the, you know, guy wanted an X Pro 3. I had it. I am continuously blown away by what I get from it and the ease.
No, it's easy. I love it. I mean, if you look at my Instagram feed, there's probably more CL than SL. And I mention it because Leica has been such a great supporter. We have a great partnership, and they're a small company, and they can't really have the footprint or the presence in marketing that the other companies do. But the quality and the you know, they bring to me the essence of what you were talking about before with film. They're a reminder of where 35 millimeter came from, and photojournalism, street photography, and the way you use those tools, and how you interact with your subjects. It's just like the root, or it's the taproot of so much of what we do. So I'm just excited and thrilled to be using them on everything that I shoot now, which I never thought I would.
That's awesome. And so you upgraded your SL to the SL2. I had an SL for a while with the 24-90, and I loved the camera in every respect, but I couldn't get it to tether. So
they have fixed that.
I know. So I abandoned ship because
I don't shoot tethered, so I didn't have. But the first time that I was asked to shoot tether, and they really forced me to, was about a year and a half ago. And after about 2 minutes, they were like, forget it, just go do your thing again. It's just because I'm constantly running and moving. I'm ripping off, I pulled the computer off the stand.
Well, now there's the wireless, that tether tools, air direct.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a personal preference. I've tethered for ages. I love tethering. I think it's pretty nice having that reference. And as much as I loved the SL, I just, having been so frustrated with it, I abandoned ship. But I've definitely had a keen eye on the SL2. I've been thinking long and hard about it.
Well, it's improved the video. It's fantastic. I mean, I love the video from the SL right out of the box, just shooting it without any lookup tables or anything, just using the defaults. It looked like Kodachrome. It looks like Kodachrome. And if you look at my short film of Jeff Ho, the surfing legend, skateboard legend, we had the cinema lenses, so that helped. But it was just the look and feel of it was just straight out of the camera, and it's very film-like. It has this beautiful look of like Kodachrome. So I am constantly sort of thrilled with the SL2, because they've taken everything that I liked about the SL and doubled the pleasure of it. There's the buffer is doubled and the file size is doubled. I didn't ask for a bigger file size because I'm always cognizant. We're always bumping up against processing speed, and about Moore's law.
We don't.
Moore's law is what we're fighting right now. It was Gordon Moore founded Intel, and in 1962 he predicted that computer chips would you'd get the double the amount of transistors on a chip every 16 to 18 months, and processing speed and that's happened, and processing speed has doubled from 62 to 6 or 7 years ago. It always doubled, and the size came down and down and down, and that was the miracle of our economy. It was driven by Moore's law and computing technology. And then it died. It stopped. They reached the limit of physics of how small the electrons and whatever could go through a channel.
Uh-oh, you froze.
Where did Doug go?
Doug, you froze. Uh-oh.
7 or 8 years ago. Did I lose you guys?
You froze for a minute when you said we reached the limitation of how much data could go through a channel, and then we lost you for whatever came after that.
Oh, good, because I was telling an embarrassing story. I'm glad that got cut. Yeah, too much information. No, I was just saying they couldn't make the pathway through the chip any smaller. You get the electron spill. So they created parallel processing in the last 7-8 years to create speed. It used to be, we thought we were at the knee of Moore's law, and it was going to, just go so super fast. We'd be able to go into the singularity by now and upload our brains, but we don't have the processing power. So this whole world economy and everything has been slowed down by physics until they figure out quantum computers. So, that's what you're up against with having bigger file sizes, because the processing speed, we're always up against that. That's always been the case, that every few years the chips would get smaller and faster, but that's been slowing down, even as the camera industry obliviously keeps doubling and tripling the file sizes without realizing now we have to download and process that as just as fast as our clients expect from last year.
Right.
So we're still in that push-pull on memory cards and downloading and processing speed on our computers and cameras. And anyway, the SL2 got much better on the buffer, and the way it manages data, and they improved a lot of stuff. I shouldn't even talk technical stuff today. I can't remember words.
You're making sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I withdrew from the SL system because I just wasn't sure. We've talked to other photographers that have, that are pretty happy with it. So it's something I would consider revisiting, if you can even get one, because they're in such limited supply.
And of course, I'd want, those primes that are either impossible to find.
Yeah,
or,
those two. All those Summicrons.
They just want if you can, wrap that in a little bow.
Yeah,
I'd be
I'll send it over. Well, we'll see. They have so many primes now. I don't have the primes for the SL. I'm using my M primes with the adapter for the SL.
Yeah, it's nice.
And it's fine.
But the M shooting like M for you is not really something you go to anymore. You're more walking around with the CL or taking the SL on set or on jobs.
I had an M10. I sold it. I want to get another one. I do, but the CL the CL is keeping me happy. So we'll see. If I get if I get any more jobs this year, we've been not working for 3 months.
Adam's he's about to put that on.
Call me later.
Well, I was able to pick up an M10M before all this shit went down and my jobs went in the garbage can.
Yeah, this is a tough time for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think I've sort of tempted, I've shot the M9M, the M240, the 246, and same with Adam, and I've fallen in love with shooting monochrome. I wish I could do everything in black and white, and the different nuances of the different versions of the cameras, and finally getting, having the M10M, realizing the strengths of that, and I don't know if there are weaknesses, but
well, don't you find that people mistake very often the fabulous color for a photograph? And when you're shooting in black and white, it's where the rubber meets the road, because your emotions are so manipulated by color. And if you convert it to black and white and it still holds up as a picture, then cool, use the color. That's what I always see in black and white. I mean, when I was a kid, I was studying the zone system, and I had Ansel Adams, one of the photographers he mentored and was his printer, was my teacher at the Art Institute, Perkle Jones. And he would just take a club and beat the shit out of you until you technically learned excellence. And so I used to always I still see things in black and white and judge it by that. And then if the color is good. And yesterday I posted something on Instagram I was actually happy with for both things. The color wasn't a crutch for the image. The color was helping support this bizarre, mysterious little fragment of a moment that I like, these incongruous, mysterious. I think this is a lot of street photographers like these unresolved things. That's kind of why I think street photography has really become so popular, is this mystery, where you have interesting compositions and incongruous, mysterious things and chaos and things going on. I mean, I've always loved that since I was a kid. And so I was really happy to be able to post something that was the color and the image I thought were complementing, the subject matter.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. I noticed that when you posted it too. I think the yellow stripes strike you, but the fact that she's wearing that turquoise bikini,
right? Hello.
And you just see like she's framed so well in that little, it's awesome. I mean, that's one of those decisive moments. So the Nobel organization just called, and I think you need to pick up.
Yeah, I think
it's really special, man. It's cool.
I accept on behalf of my whole family. I had a show in LA once called Lucky Shots, and I just think what we said earlier, you practice, you have your practice, and then it pays off with what you call, I mean, that's a lucky shot, but you saw it subconsciously. You were ready, you practiced, and you got it. Yeah. So everything came together. So I'll take credit, but I still feel it was kind of like,
will I accept the prize? Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Well, look, just be thankful that you weren't shooting with an M10, because it would have been out of focus and the framing would have been off.
I wouldn't say that for
I'm
sure.
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Adam's just trying to make himself feel better for when he sells
I'm
it.
kidding. I'm kidding. No, it's look, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, look, at the end of the day, I'm fairly agnostic when it comes to equipment. I just know that there's certain equipment that makes me more compelled to shoot, that makes me feel more creative, that makes me feel more connected. And that leads a lot of my choices. But look, there's great photography being made by stuff that you wouldn't even consider. So this is not like saying like, oh, it's an inferiority with other equipment. People do great stuff with almost anything. But
you should be able to shoot anything. But I think that the tool can make you better, and that's where I'm at.
What lenses do you use for your CL? I'm curious.
I have well, let me just go tell you, but I have the new one I'm using is the 18 Pancake that I got.
Oh, cool.
And I'm liking that a lot. I'm liking that a lot.
Look at this. We're in the vault. in the camera safe.
Controlled vault.
Yeah, no, I'm using all my M primes, and that 18 is my go-to right now when I walk around. So yeah, but the 35 and
23, right? For the TL lenses.
No, I'm using with an adapter.
Okay. Oh, okay. 35 with the
M primes. Yeah. I used to have the 90 and the 70. I sold my 75. Which I loved. I didn't want to sell it, but it was
which 75.
It was the Sumilux. It was like $7,500. It was nuts, and I almost never used it. But what a sweet focal length! I heard you say 75, and I thought that's odd because almost nobody I know has that.
I had the 7. So my first with the M9, I had the 35, and I was so into tight portraits at the time, and portraits in general, and once I got the 75 Summicron, I never took it off my M9. For years, that was my focal length.
Speaking of the M9, the M8, do you guys ever notice how the blooming you see on most other sensors? The first thing I noticed about the M8 was that it didn't have that blooming. It actually, you didn't have to be at f22 to get a star when you shot into the sun. You didn't get this blob. It was a Kodak sensor, the M8, made in Japan.
And the M9, yeah.
And the M9. And it had this ability to parse that data in the highlights that very few sensors, even today, will do.
No, Daniel and I have waxed poetic about the M9 because there's something about that CCD sensor that is unique to it's the interesting thing is that it's the only CCD sensor that was ever put in a full frame camera. And that was the only camera that ever featured a full frame CCD sensor.
Right. That's right.
So it's an anomaly, that camera. And
if you can work within its limitations.
Yes.
I just don't feel comfortable anymore with the limitations of it's just you have to be in a special mood. But I'm never going to get rid of it. I love that. I have tons of pictures with that camera that I'm proud of.
Right. Mm-hmm. There's something unique and special about it. And then there's been times I've used it and I've been like, ugh, I can't use this.
Well, I sold my original one because I was in the phase where I was like, I'm not using it. It's impractical on the majority of my shoots. And I was looking to get into other gear. And I sold it, which I obviously regret. But more so, I regret selling my 75, which I have not bought back because the price just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I do too. I won't be buying that soon.
But now, well,
not in this economy.
The local shop by me, I think, might be getting a 75 Luxon. So I gotta see what the price.
Sell your house, man.
What the price?
Do it. Go for it.
How was it?
Not right now.
How much time did you get a lot of one-on-one time with Steve Jobs?
Well, I was trying to stay out of his sight line.
Right.
And, Teresa asked me the other day, or not the other day, a few months back, we were talking about Steve, and she said, "Why did you push Steve away?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, he was trying to be your friend, and you were always very cold. I was like, Really? I was
Oh,
trying to be professional. I was shooting for Life magazine. I was trying to be, objective or not get sucked into the cult, because he wanted to mind meld with you. So I did spend, he showed me how to write a business plan. He was a great teacher. He was very kind to Teresa and Paolo. He would, I would bring them over to Next. Next Computer was when he was fired from Apple. He started to build the supercomputer that would transform education. That's why I wanted to do the story. It wasn't so much Steve. It was that this guy who changed the world is going to attempt to transform education. That's a story. Only I thought it was a story, but super boring for my friends and colleagues. But Peter Howe at Life magazine agreed, yeah, this could be transformational. But it was always a very esoteric, personal thing in the end. And Steve got it from the first. I pitched him on it, and he was already thinking of it. I was just in the right place at the right time. And my friend Rick Smolin, I think, had even talked to him about doing it before, and Rick had recommended me. I probably wouldn't have a career without Rick, but Steve took my pictures and framed them and hung them up because it started to put a window. It gave a reflection back to the team that were working their asses off day and night, that they mattered. They were it became a way to create a culture. Just having these documentary images up on the wall, it gave everybody their 15 minutes, and it was also a good way to exploit and keep people working hard. Now,
yeah.
but yeah, we had minimal one-on-one time, a few meetings, but I was there with him documenting, so I was watching. And,
You saw a lot.
I saw a lot. I learned a lot, and I would
Yeah.
talk to his team all the time. People would, once they trusted me. It was hard to gain access and get trust in the Valley because, as paranoid and tight as it is today, it was exactly the same back then. There was a lot of secrecy and competition. It was growing and exploding, so people were really protecting IP. And why would you have a photographer roaming around shooting these top secret projects? No one could trust that.
When you did these, sorry.
No, it was just a rare thing. And that's why, because Steve trusted me, that's why I continued for 15 years, because I kept getting calls from astonishing, groundbreaking projects. And people would call like the CEO and say, hey, it's not all about Steve. We're cool too.
Ah.
That's how I got to Adobe. And I went back to Apple and did a secret project inside Apple. And it just was really cool that I was able to be this guy that Steve trusted. So I was even shooting companies that were suing each other, and they all gave me a free pass. I was that secret guy. And I never betrayed anyone's trust either.
Amazing. That you were there for, I guess, the foundation of so much of kind of what is driving a lot of the content creative process these days. Because I remember when I was in the band, I had an IT job, and I just became like the go-to guy at some company. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm like doing Mac-based IT support. And I remember people, running those first versions of Photoshop and Quark.
And Pro Tools.
Yeah, Pro Tools. All that stuff was so buggy. And I remember with my band, we were recording something, and the guy who had the studio, Sammy Marandino, the guy who plays with Cyndi Lauper, drums, really cool guy, had this amazing space down in Tribeca, and his 9600 was having issues, and the session came to a halt. And I remember going into his computer closet, which was 1,000 degrees. It wasn't ventilated properly, and there was wires there. But it's just funny how so much of that stuff, you don't think about where it came from, how crappy it was when it started. It was interesting, it was fun, but it was really rudimentary.
Well, you're talking about the competition forces. Once Wall Street got involved, it was unbearable to be watching these people burning out to try to get this stuff out to market, to invent something new for a new market that didn't know it needed it, and what happened was, originally, these dreamers and idealists, this is what attracted me. They really wanted to build tools that would improve our lives. They wanted to transform the world. And I had come back from shooting the famine in Ethiopia and this horrible conflict. And I was like, what is the meaning of my life? I can't even contribute to that. What can I do? How can I do something meaningful? And then I realized, well, I don't have to change the world. These guys are actually going to do it, or are doing it. All I got to do is show up and document these people. And there were women coming in, and I documented that whole diversity thing happening with women coming in as well. But when I say guys, I think it was dominated by 27-year-old white male geeks, but that did change. It hasn't changed in 30 years, but statistically, but in the 90s, there was a push to get diversity, and it did change how the products were designed and how they were built. But the conflict became, inventing this stuff took a long time. Venture capital and investors, as the 80s changed into the 90s, the time frame shortened and shortened and shortened. And by the end of the 90s, everybody wanted to go to the IPO. What that did in the early 90s would put so much pressure on Microsoft. They were doing Windows, and they kept announcing it and not releasing it. And so Bill Gates would get these scathing attacks at these conferences. And this guy named Stuart Alsop invented a term called vaporware. So Bill, when are you going to release this vaporware? And that, they released it immediately with all the bugs. They used to do alpha, beta, and golden master. So by the time it came out, people had almost died to make sure your software had no bugs. So I take this personally because I was there at 3 in the morning watching these guys hunt. They used to call it a bug hunt. And I would watch them bust their asses to ship pristine software to the users. Once Microsoft released that product with bugs, they started this whole idea that we would be the bug testers. The users could send in reports and help them find the bugs while our lives are destroyed by crashes.
Do you wish to send diagnostics?
So the whole industry flipped on a dime to satisfy Wall Street investors and get stuff to market and own the space faster. Did you even need to know that?
Well, coming up using an Apple computer and only Apple computers, it's like I loathe having to go near a Windows operating system.
Oh, it's great now. I actually think Microsoft's doing great stuff, but they created this rush to get stuff to market. Everybody had to compete.
Right, but back in the day,
it wasn't good.
It was just terrible. It's like and it didn't look nice and aesthetically and whatever. But that's interesting. When you were doing when you're doing this kind of coverage, are you just with a camera? You bring lighting? Do you have assistants, or is it literally just you and your camera?
Mostly just me. In those days, in the 80s, particularly, it was mostly me with my. Usually, I'd have 3 bodies, 3 lenses, and I would just walk for hours, like street photography, through the hallways. I mean, it was exactly like that, looking for any sign of human behavior. Because engineers don't emote. Okay, I'm generalizing, but they don't. That's all in their head. So you're taking pictures of people staring into computer screens. So I had to really get to know, they're going to do this thing. I would find out, they're going to be doing this thing at 1 a.m. or they're going to be doing it on Saturday. And I would go down at odd hours just to be there for some milestones.
Right.
And I would catch some interaction. Or I did a lot of meetings. I became an expert at shooting pieces of people's faces and eyes and hands, and I just would get so bored. But I also learned how to become invisible, because there was so much paranoia that even when Steve told people to trust me, the engineers they had minds of their own, obviously, and they wouldn't always do that. But I learned how to be completely invisible. I tried to channel like Kung Fu or something, and I would sit in the corner with my camera like this for like 20 minutes without moving. And the meeting would get so hot and engaged that they would forget I was there. And the reason I know that I was invisible is that one meeting, I didn't know who it was. I had just come into the room, but it was the accounting department. And they had bought prints from me, this particular company. I don't remember what company it was. And I had sent them a bill for the prints and the frames. Because once Steve hung the pictures, everybody wanted pictures to hang, And the guy was reading the list of payables, and he came, Menuez Pictures LLC, and some guy, that's just the photographer. Put it at the bottom of the list. I was like, I knew it. Nobody paid. We have to fight to get paid. And anyway, I was like, I just went, and they all looked over. Hi.
It's like we start from the bottom up here, Apple.
But it was like any other assignment. You had to gain trust. You had to be discreet. You were a fly on the wall, trying not to impact the tribe. I saw them as a hidden tribe, inventing a new culture that would be, they had to make a new culture that could have a way to support the level of innovation that they were bringing.
Sure.
And before that, I mean, they changed the nature of work, because before that time, It was 9 to 5, suits and ties. It was a very Wall Street kind of businessy New York thing. And these California hippie engineers, just Steve and his rebels, just blew that up and created a whole new world, which then filtered out to the entire United States and the world in terms of how companies were structured.
And now we're on the brink of a complete revolution.
Correct. Yeah.
And evolution as well, because you read. I mean, I'm sure you've read articles of late, about how is the workforce going to go back to work? These office buildings that have thousands of people that they have to get on the subway or the bus with all these people. Then they have to wait in a lobby for elevators. I'm sure you've been on a gig in New York, trying to get up into the elevator with everybody else and all your gear. That's awful.
Well, now all the elevators there, it's like
the whole elevator bank is like completely clogged, right?
No, but you have to go and tell the computer.
Oh, right, and it says like elevator E, and it's at the end, and there's like 60 people in the little breezeway. Yeah, and people with all those little cubicle things, even if they're open, they're sitting right next to each other. It's like, how, what is, so this is interesting to see what innovations will occur that will now change the the way we do things and the way we do things as photographers. You started in the pre-roll talking about how you've been spending a lot of time on figuring out ways that we can safely go back to work as photographers.
It's been a challenge. We got the CDC guidelines. We got Lionsgate has created a set of guidelines. There's the ASMP has a really, really important resource that you can go to right now. And we've created my own company's set of CDC mandated protocols for shooting for safety, on set. Yeah. And this is what we're presenting to clients, and they're asking for it. They want this, and they want to know, can we shoot? I think what's interesting for me as a documentary photographer rooted in this visual storytelling, I did an awful lot of assignments in hospitals in PPE and masks and gloves and gowns. I was in nuclear reactor cores all gowned up. I was in, all kinds of situations, where I was really encumbered by the equipment to shoot. Yeah. People with immune systems diseases. I was shooting, AIDS patients with immune system. I had to wear PPE for surgeries that I would shoot. So I think I'm in a perfect position for shooting like this now because I have so much practice at it.
Sure.
But nobody believes that. Nobody knows that. So we've had to really create, and my producer, Linda Goldstein, is totally versed in this, and she's actually got a certificate. She took a CDC course, so she's the safety monitor on set now. So all photographers have to be thinking, because you know what, this doesn't seem to be going away. And the way we're managing it, it's going to have all these waves. And if there's waves coming and going, it's never going to be gone until there's a vaccine, which probably won't be coming as soon as people want to think. So, our whole society is going to change. This could be really not good. I'm really worried, to be honest. Yeah. I don't see an easy way out here unless unless I move to New Zealand or South Korea.
I saw Adam's stress level just shoot through the roof.
No, I read an article just I think it was in today, maybe came out yesterday, about how I think 1 in 4 Americans refuse to get the vaccine.
Yeah, that started, and it's an anti-science thing, and it's not only from the right, it's from the left and the right.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not politicizing it. I'm just saying that people think that we're rushing to do it, and that they don't trust it, and that it's that there's so many different kinds of contingencies on there. I'm definitely concerned about this, and it's like I worry about my family. I don't want to bring anything home, and or compromise myself and limit my ability to earn, or worse. So it's really like it's unbelievable, but I think that it is something good for any photographer that's listening to this to familiarize themselves with the ASMP guidelines that have been put out there. It's free. It's a resource.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think look, I just sent out a bid for a job where it's like a whole portraits thing at LaGuardia And I'm just like, I'd love to have the job. I mean, it sounds freaking awesome, but I'm thinking like, how am I going to do this?
I mean, do you go to the supermarket at all? Do you go
I
grocery
do.
shopping? So it's no worse or better than that. You're using social distancing, you're masked. I was doing gloves. I'm hearing now there's thoughts that if you just keep constantly washing and,
That's what I'm doing now.
it's better than
Your
gloves.
gloves, I mean,
It's a false sense of security, right?
Well, then you take off you touch things with the gloves, whatever's on the gloves, or you take them off and yeah. So I stop with the gloves for the most part. And I have hand sanitizer literally like in my car, and it's always with me, whatever. So just trying to do our best.
I think that's what you got to do, is just, you got to be ritualistic, and there's no assistant touching your camera. They're not going to be downloading. You can put your memory card in a safe station and walk away. And when you're 6 feet away, they can go and pick it up. But then they have to put it in the computer and clean their hands immediately.
Right.
And it's just like that. That's the world
that's the other thing I like about this whole wireless tethering thing that I'm going to start looking into, because it's a way now to not have the cables, because the cables draping on the floor.
Yeah.
Everyone's stepping on the floor and whatever they're bringing on. So no more cables on the floor.
You just sold me on tethering, dude. But is it really fast enough?
Well,
it's Wi-Fi. It can't be fast enough for these giant files.
Apparently it is.
Okay.
I mean, one of my good friends is, he started off doing assisting, and then he realized that he was an incredible digitech, and he's been all over the world. He's incredible. And we've been in touch, and he's like an ambassador for these guys. And he said that it's just amazing. It does JPEG and RAW files instantaneously. So I'm going to give it a shot, because I love tethering. I love having to, with the client, being able to look at the focus, being able to look at the light fall off, really having that kind of, sense. Look, there's nothing wrong with pulling out your card, going to the computer, seeing where you're at, and being like, okay, we're in a good place right now.
Well, this comes back to film. I like to slow it down and keep it mysterious as long as I can.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm already tapping into the mystery. When we shot film, can you imagine the set and all the pressure, and no one can see anything, and it's all based on a Polaroid, and it's just all, that went great. We nailed it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How the fuck do you know?
I don't know, but I feel good about it, but let's, because I'm a professional, I covered my ass, but I did all these things and I know what to do. But you don't really know with film until you process. And what's happening now with digital, everyone wants everything so fast. I don't have time, and I'm shooting so much. I'm shooting action unfolding. I don't even remember all the things that I did.
Oh, definitely.
And I'm shooting so fast, and they're looking at it and making judgments whether I got it or not. And often I will have a creative, we'll go and do a review. We'll stop and we'll go back and look. And they're like, no, that's not. And I was working out an idea before I got to the thing that I knew. And I knew that I had to lead the talent through the peaks and valleys till I would get them where I needed them to be. And I'm like, and then I press the button and it goes to the frame, and they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super annoying.
I don't like that. I'd rather have a chance to edit myself and present what I know they're interested in. Then I show them the surprises and they go, oh, that's even better. I mean, I love that collaboration. I'm just saying there has to be a level of trust. And when you're looking at it so quickly, you might be making judgments that aren't valid because you're not seeing the totality of all the work
that
I'm doing. So, I mean, there has to be an expectation and an education process where somehow I can marry how I need to shoot my process of tapping into the mystery and going into the zone and waiting and watching with the demands and needs of a really, powerful client spending a ton of dough.
Sure.
With a lot riding on the line. So this is the constant push-pull.
Yeah.
By the way, if your buddy can tell you, is there anything faster? I mean, what is the fastest location Wi-Fi? I think I have it. It's the latest Wi-Fi from Verizon. I haven't found one faster. I mean, even tapping into 5G doesn't help me because 5G isn't everywhere. So it's kind of like, what is the fastest LTE 4G? What do you do? Because that's one of the things. Even
like with a MiFi unit or something?
Yeah, MiFi. If you're tethering, like I could see maybe trying to buy your own portable wireless tower, a satellite kit. I just want to know what is going to happen? That's going to have to be the next
I think
thing.
you might be able to set up a closed network where you can directly go from the camera to the computer, so that you're not using.
That's one thing, but then you have to share to the clients are not on set.
But no, but then you can share, like if you're using Capture One, then you can share with, through Capture to like an iPad or
right.
These are all good questions. You know what?
But I'm talking about, they're not on set, they're miles away. So then your signal's going to whatever
then it
your
has to be over
cellular
Wi-Fi.
is.
Yeah.
And whatever your Wi-Fi is based on whatever cellular, if you're out in the country.
100%.
What is the location solution for the Mojave Desert?
Well, let me say this. I have people that I can talk to about that.
Okay.
And we can drill down that without having them. And like you, I am much more inclined to lean on people that are expert in this. Just like, I have retouchers I deal with. Like, there's things that, like, I can't be really good at everything. I'm barely good at anything. But there are people that are a lot better than me at certain things, like Digitech, like retouching. And I lean on them and I hire them when I need to. And I'm happy to do so.
I think that's very wise, and I agree with you. And I absolutely depend on people way smarter than me, including my clients,
to
help me out. So yeah.
But the idea is, like, now that we have to really limit ourselves. Like, I'm not going to be bringing in the same size crew.
No.
So if I can if I can wirelessly tether, that also can streamline certain things.
Yeah, and everybody's going to have 2 jobs or 3 jobs.
I agree. And look, I came up, that way, being able to kind of, exactly. So I'm not, look, there's no job that is beneath me. There's nothing that I don't want to do. Like, even if I'm on set, like, and my assistant is like sitting there setting up all the light stands and like the cables, like, I have to help. Like, if I'm not with the client, or I'm not doing something else, I can't just sit there and be like, oh yeah, you got this. It's like, and I've done that before. I understand that that we're a team, and there's no job. Well, there's no job that I don't want to be there and be like, shit. I don't know how to do this stuff.
He sits back drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Looking at his motorcycle magazines.
I like your work ethic, though. If it, I have.
You're so right, Daniel.
I mean, I was shocked. The first commercial that I shot, I guess there was a union set or something. I don't know. My incredibly fabulous producer at the time, Ellen Irwit, who was running Colossal Films, and she helped me do a TV commercial by producing it. And I remember doing what you do. I reached over to move a light, and she like slapped my hand. She said, "The light will be moved for you. You're the director. Just tell us what you want." And that's a Hollywood thing, and you can kind of get lulled into that director mentality. And I've had lots of shoots where I had a crew of 60 people and shooting all around the world on a lot of these campaigns. And yeah, it's kind of cool. You're the director. You do this, do that. But honestly, I grew up working. I mean, I was a garbage man for the state of New York for $2 an hour. I was a landscaper. I made ice cream for $2 an hour in a 60 below freezer. I was a bank teller. I could never balance. I was always putting the wrong money in the wrong account. I had
like Monopoly.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 10 years old, I was a paper boy, and then I got a job at the 7-Eleven stocking shelves when I was 12, and I was a janitor at the food town, and I was did all of these shitty jobs. I was on a fishing boat. I don't even know how many jobs I did before I finally got paid to take pictures for a newspaper. That was, when I was 19. That was like, oh, they're paying me to take pictures. So that was
cool.
I should keep doing this.
Yeah, you should keep doing it. So that's why I'm like you. I like to help out. I do tend to grab stuff, but now we're back to that. Whether we like it or not, we're all going to be doing that now.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm not above any of these things. Yes, I'm perfectly happy being on set with people that are being paid to do certain things and like not, having to get involved in like the more menial stuff. But I'm not above any of it, and I'm happy to do it if that's what it takes for me to continue working. And I think that we're just going to have to be more resourceful. But I really love the idea of, being able to provide to our clients our plan, our guidelines for how we are going to conduct a job, and just mandate that, and just on both sides. so that, you know, that there's that understand. It's like negotiating your rates. It's like you want that understanding prior to going to the job. You know, you don't want to have to like then backtrack and be like, oh, well, you know, so.
Well, that's the hardest part about being a professional, is learning to say no and set boundaries and let things walk away. I mean, you got to walk away from, you're never going to win a negotiation you can't walk away from.
Right.
But I mean, if you don't stand up and for your bottom line principles, there will never be respect for you on any aspect of the production. I mean, photographers are not respected automatically out of the box anyway. So you have to establish that. But have you noticed the bids now are, everything is what, when we did our plan, our shoot plan, it was like, wait a minute, this is going to take twice as long.
Yes.
We can't do 2 shots in a day. We can only do 1 shot in a day, honestly. You know, it's not going to be, it's going to take twice as long, and it's going to be much more expensive therefore. So everything's going to be slower and more expensive, and we're going to work harder.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Let's make sure that it does, you know, happen that way, and people still have money to spend on photography.
I just want to work. Exactly.
Yeah. Definitely.
I just want people getting married again.
Yes, right. It's exactly. Digital weddings. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zoom
virtual, right.
Zoom weddings. So what is your biggest challenge now going forward for you guys? What do you see are the next steps, and how do you see this? I don't mean to be so negative.
No, I mean, I am waiting for, I mean, there's twofold. One, weddings that I've had during this time have been pushed. Most of them are being pushed a full year, a full calendar year.
Wow.
And there's been no one's been reaching out about dates because no one's thinking about planning a wedding during this time. So you're losing the deposit, you're losing your 2021, 2022 bookings. And, you know, and then, so that's the majority of my business. And then also the corporate lifestyle shoots that I don't run huge sets, but there's contactors and businesses that are not working with medium-sized companies. Their budgets can't support a lifestyle shoot.
That's going to be an interesting thing to figure out. I mean, there are the New York Times had a story about 2 Hollywood productions and how they solved it. And one of them was to make the entire cast and crew quarantine in place for 2 weeks in Australia. And then they began shooting.
That's brilliant. We should do that with all of our clients. Perfect.
I mean, I don't know what else we're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to do social distancing and PPE and follow these strict protocols. That's what we're going to do. And I don't think it's going to be a problem in terms of safety. I think it's going to be safe, and I think it's going to be doable because I'm used to that anyway. But I think we can deliver the pictures. But when you're listening to you talk about these corporate shoots, which I used to do a lot of, and I'd be happy to do more, but I think there's going to be another resurgence in stock, and that's really prevalent already. We're getting stock requests every single day. Mm-hmm. So that was an industry that I guess the big companies killed in a race to the bottom on pricing.
Yep.
We spent millions getting involved in that, and then it all fell apart. So, we made millions on it way back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and then I didn't really care about stock. I was just shooting. And then we got into it, and it didn't work because it all collapsed. So now I don't even have the psychic mental energy for it to think about stock. We have a big archive, but it's just,
I can't even tell you how many people are like, oh, you should shoot stock photography. And I'm like, pennies on the dollar. You know,
it might go up though. That might be a thing to think about. And
it could be
new material. If you can get into a distribution channel or have your own, right. I think you guys got to think, we all have to think about it. I'm just thinking about it. I'm not sure how to do it.
It's a valid and worthy thing to think about.
I mean, a lot of people are also selling prints.
I want to try to do that.
Yeah.
I want to try to sell prints on Instagram, but I don't know, other than Magnum and some of the other National Geographic, I don't know how successful individual people are unless they have like 100,000 followers. I don't know if it's working.
I think you do just fine.
It's worth a shot. I mean,
I want to try.
Yeah. No, I want to try. I think you do just fine. And it's some lovely, like I was just talking about with Adam yesterday. You keep it small until it's overgrown you, and then you can sort of see where you're at. You know, there's no commitment. I mean, unless you're doing editioning, which, you know, I've had long conversations with different photographers about the bullshit of editioning for gallery. You know, there's the galleries, there's if you're just making individualized prints, who you're going to work with. So the costs are there, but you charge what you charge, and you see what happens.
Well, I came out of this whole fine art idea that, and you know, for many years we've sold limited editions out of the studio. And then since 2012, we've had this traveling exhibit going around the world. It hasn't traveled in a year now, but it's the Fearless Genius book that was published by Simon & Schuster, is now in 6 countries and 17 languages. And the book created a demand for a traveling exhibit. It's been in Moscow and China and all over Europe. And so we were selling limited edition prints from that. And then we got involved in a couple of galleries. Things didn't really work out. It's a very hard system, and galleries. But anyway, it's never been sustainable for me to do limited editions. It's just people calling and sell a print for a lot of money, thousands of dollars, but we're not in that. I'm not a gallery. You know, it's very hard to maintain that. And the galleries deals never worked out that I've tried. I've been approached and I've tried to do it. It never worked out. And not because necessarily the stuff was selling, but it wasn't working out for me on my end. Yeah. And I won't get into that on tape. Thank you. But I don't want to get sued, but it didn't work out. And so now I look at online sales, and we've been looking at online sales for 3-4 years, researching it. I had a partner in this for a while. We built a site. We did a soft launch, and it didn't work. And we don't know why. And now I'm looking at Instagram, and now the prices are so low, $50 to $150. You know, we were selling from $2,500 up to $10,000 on edition prints. Yeah. If you sell these low price prints, I worry, doesn't that devalue? If you want to be in the art market, you have to be in the secondary market in New York, in the auctions, right? If you sell prints at this low price, are you devaluing your existing editions? And you are, probably, unless you keep it to digital prints online and you do silver gelatin or something offline.
Well, yeah, so, I think you have to sort of balance the types of prints.
Right.
And if you're making lower quality prints for a lower price, or
you wouldn't call them lower quality.
Well, no, if you're using different materials and techniques.
Different materials.
Yeah. Well,
not
digital,
silver gelatin.
Yeah.
Digital
inkjet prints are not valued yet the same as vintage silver gelatin in the official fine art market. It's just not accepted yet. It's getting there. There are inkjet prints selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are, but those artists already have a name. But somebody breaking in, you wouldn't have the same value equation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that part of the problem is that it's like music. It's like virtually any kind of content that's out there. There's too much. It's being pushed out there every second of every minute of every day. And people just don't have the attention span. So why would somebody want to buy your prints over my prints over Daniel's prints? I mean, we're 3 photographers here
there's good reasons.
There's, for every 3 of us, there's another like 30,000.
Well, they got to see them first, and then they got to be.
How do you get their eyes on them? You know,
that's
how do you get people's eyes?
But all you could do is you have your following, and you have the people that look at your work and appreciate it.
But once you've kind of saturated your following, okay, how does it then go from there? Because your following, they're gonna be excited the first time, then the second round, and then the excitement diminishes.
Yeah, it's like you're having the same people walk through the same gallery every day.
I got it. I got the answer.
Bingo.
I have to talk to my daughter-in-law Devin first, because I want to see if it's not stupid. Before I say it, I'll call you later. But I think you just made me think of it, what the answer is to that question. And I think, and Devin is really smart, and she's been helping me figure out we're about to launch doing prints online, on Instagram, and we'll see how that. But I think we have to restructure it now based on what you just said.
I don't even know what we just said, but
yeah.
Yeah. No, well, look, Doug, it's the same thing. I've been thinking about the exact same thing. I want to start selling prints online through Instagram as well, because that's where I have that following. I have a YouTube following, We're building this podcast, I mean, so all of these different outlets are good. I don't want to come off as like a selly kind of a person. Like, here, buy my.
No, but if you're an artist, that's the only way to make a living. So
Exactly.
we have to move into that space.
And
we're
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't an artist that isn't completely, constantly somebody, if their spouse or their agent or somebody is selling that work, because that's the only, or the artist is.
Well, look, if we really wanted to make money and do a real money grab, we would all start selling Lightroom presets. And I no, I know. I knew you would laugh.
I keep looking at that. I'm like, what is this? It's amazing.
Doug, you would be shocked, and I'm not going to talk about it online. What kind of money can be? I mean, you would just be like, why would I ever want to make a print? You know why we make prints? Because it's vanity. Because it makes us feel like artists. It's limited. It's fussy.
Look how beautiful this.
Look at how beautiful. Oh my God! And there's nothing wrong with prints, but selling presets, that's like what second homes are paid for with.
And it's selling razor blades. Instead of the razor. I don't make prints to sell prints because of vanity.
Right.
I actually grew up. The only way I could see my work was I made the print. I couldn't see what I did. So it feels like I've cut off part of my body by not making the print.
No, I didn't.
And it's funny how, I'm jumping to a different way of looking at this, because you reminded me of this, the real thing about prints that I miss. And I do have a big printer here and I print somewhat, but I don't print like I used to. I mean, I would take every job and print it, and I wouldn't know it or understand it until I did that. And I never could look at the stuff on the screen the same way.
Right.
As a print. And
we talked with Chuck Fishman a
Oh,
while back. And so I've spent some time with him in his house, making prints and watching him. And it's the first time I was able to experience it. And it's such a tactile, emotional experience. And even for him, who's been doing it for a very long time, it's still the mindset of today's printing day. Today's when I work on this one photo.
Wow, I missed that.
I know. I'm going to make 6 copies and they're all going to be shit. But then, you leave them for a week, you come back, and then the steps that it takes, and then you pull out your drawers, and I never had this, but you pull out your drawers and you have to flatten them after the ferrous cyanide little eyes and teeth and whatever.
This is still here. Here's the printer.
Nice.
But look,
there's
the flat files.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Go. There you go.
It's still here. I hardly ever open it. I love this podcast because you guys are reminding me of all the things I miss and I need to do to feed my photographer's soul, which is today's a printing day. I can't even imagine that because we're so interrupted every 15 seconds with, I got a post, or I got an email, or I got a text. Blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
printing day. I used to have
the computer's up there. He's answering.
This is what it used to be. I would put on Coltrane.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a bottle of tequila. I would just go into the zone and I would print all fucking night. That was it. I remember I was so lucky when I was 17, I got to meet and show my portfolio to Gene Smith, Eugene Smith. And
wow.
He was a hero.
Amazing.
And he was drinking 2 mugs of scotch and pretty high. But I'll never forget because, I had just seen him give a presentation and talk about his work and show his work. And, he wrote Ansel Adams a letter saying, I want to be accepted as an artist, because he was getting so much critique from photojournalists because he was sandwiching negs or he was moving the subject. And he described it as an artist's subjective truth. He said, I'm no longer shooting, for the lowest common denominator out of the 7 million life readers, the least visually sophisticated person. So, but he felt like he was creating truthful representations of what he had observed. So he thought it was okay to manipulate the images.
I think
right?
That's who I think Chuck was mentored by.
Yeah, that's right. So, and he probably would laugh when he heard this, but anyway, he looked at the stuff, and the first thing he did was he was like, "You have to burn this more." But I burned.
Right.
But I did. He goes,
listen, kid, I go in my dark room. I'll be there 7 days, dodging and burning and making prints day and night. And, you know, you've all seen pictures of his dark room and the scotch, and he's playing Coltrane and Monk. You know, that's what I grew up trying to idolize, to be like. But he talked for a long time about the print and how, you know, you make that print, and when you look at it, put yourself in a place where you can see it as objectively as you can, as if you're somebody else. And if you're honest, you'll notice something right away. You'll notice something that could be dodged or burned more or better. And it's not quite there yet. And it might have been the 60th print you've made, but you must go back into that darkroom and do that print again until you pull that print out of the fixer and you look at it and you know, and it just sings. It's perfect. You can't stop until you've reached that point. Otherwise,
I'm going to set my basement up now for printing, because just so you know, my generation now, for me, it's another generation that when I go down the basement, I'm just developing in the basement. So right now I'm developing my film and scanning it and then making digital prints from it. But I put on jazz. The lights are, I mean, there's minimal lights. It's on anyways. I'm in the basement, and I'm just trying to channel for those 16 minutes, 17 minutes that I'm down there, you know, because then I'm like, and then my kids are yelling. I got to go.
That's 17 minutes. You're not on Instagram.
I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on my phone because my timer is going, you know, I got my timer going on. I'm just listening to music and inverting every 30 seconds.
No, well, I'm jealous you're doing that. It reminds me that I started trying to meditate the last few years, and during this particular last 3 months, it's been really stressful. How are you guys handling stress? Besides
I'm
working out,
incredibly lucky that I discovered mountain biking about 1.5 years ago.
Really?
Well, I rediscovered it. I did it in my 20s and even in my teens, but
no, it's awesome.
And it is the most zen thing I've ever done. Your mind is completely singular because all you're doing is navigating and pedaling as hard as you can to get through stuff. And
yeah, absolutely.
So between the actual event, which, you know, we go out for a couple hours, and then the zen bliss that you feel, that kind of, you know, zonked out kind of buzzy feeling, it really has become such an incredible thing. Because it kind of resets everything. So I'm that's been my saving grace, if you want to call it that. Because it's really easy to kind of spiral down into a black hole and just get really bummed out.
Man, now I'm sad because we used to live at the base of Mount Tam in Mill Valley. And I used to know Gary Fisher. I photographed him for USA Today, I think in '83. He invented mountain bikes, you know, right. So they say. And he actually gave me a Gary Fisher mountain bike.
Wow.
So I used to ride with my son up Mount Tam. We used to do it every Saturday. And it's true what you're saying. You're completely in the zone because if you make a mistake, you're going off the mountain. You know, so it was a really good way to forget your troubles. I really miss that.
You know, if you had that Gary Fisher right now, it'd be worth a few bucks. Those original Gary Fishers are like so collectible.
I gave it to an assistant who asked for it, and we were moving, and I was like, "Yeah, I didn't even think about it. You're right." I'm an idiot.
Of course, yeah. I mean, my buddy, you know, he's got a bunch of them. He has like this ridiculous original Gary Fisher that's like this custom paint that was like one of a handful of this. Yeah, it's like silly, and you know, that's just anyway.
The evolution of a bike. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. But
well, I bought a bike 1.5 years ago, and it's I dusted off a couple times, and then I put it back in the garage. Wow. I have not. You know, for me, it's cooking, walking, taking some photos, and I'm talking about like 5-10 minutes because of my kids. You know, being on full time, it's just a different. It's a different world. Fighting, bedtime fighting, and the 2 glasses of wine at night help.
You have about another 16, 17 years of exactly that.
Yeah. And even if there weren't a pandemic, you'd be doing that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not a ton has changed except for the income coming in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that, you know, I've moved from It's good hearing you guys talk about that. I've actually started cooking a lot, partly because on Christmas, my wife broke her foot, and she is a master chef. I mean, she's just such a natural Brazilian chef, so I could make stuff, nothing like that. I'm not a cook, but I did work as a sous chef. That was one of my jobs when I was like 16 or 14 or something. I was promoted from dishwasher to sous chef when the chef quit. But anyway,
that seems like a big promotion.
It was, because what happened, it was actually a 3-star New York Times French restaurant in Northport, Long Island. And Tommy Santoriello, the lead singer and lead guitar player in our band, and I had this dishwashing job during the day, and we would play at night gigs. And Tommy's mom was first generation. She had immigrated from Italy, and he was just a natural cook. But the owner of the restaurant came in. He had a famous French chef. The guy walked out. They had a big fight. He walks into the kitchen and he goes, "You're the chef. You're the sous chef. Here's what you do." And he took us over, and he had a book of recipes, handwritten, and he walked us through it. And I started making sauces and escargot and, basic things. And Tommy was the chef, and he took to it like a duck to water. And we cooked the whole summer. And nobody ever complained. No one knew. They were coming out from Manhattan because it was in the Times, and no one said a word, not a word. And then I never cooked really since then much other than an omelet. So anyway, she broke her foot, but it was to the point where she really couldn't even walk or stand. She couldn't stand. She broke 3 bones.
Ouch.
So I started experimenting, and I started getting into it. So that was cool.
Nice.
But the one thing I feel like that's happening now for me is I'm getting more positive about this whole time. Not that it's not going to be bad, or that it is bad. All our jobs just stopped, but I definitely feel something is coming out of this that's going to be positive. I don't know why I feel that way, but
I'll take it. I'll run with it.
I've moved into that space, and I think it's probably I run every day, and I do try to meditate. Although the ADD thing just kills that. I'll find myself.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah,
ADD does not help.
No.
It's really hard.
I love your positivity generally. Overall, I mean, even the first time, when at that event, I just, the minute kind of, you were so positive, and it was so chaotic, and it was so hot, and you're just like, come on, let's go. And
oh man, that's funny.
No, it really translated.
I forgot about that. I remember now, but I forgot about that day. You have to understand that they asked me to do this street photography thing that I had done for several years for Photo Expo, and my classes were limited to 25, and they always sold out.
Little did you know there'd be 130 people on that thing.
150.
150. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not trying to take anything away from it.
No, but I was like, I was like, when were you going to tell me?
Yeah. It was.
How do you make it satisfying and teach 150 people? That's why I did the lecture off the top of my head at the beginning.
I almost bailed, because I was like, but then I was like, it's such a beautiful day. The light was so exquisite. The couple were so lovely. And somehow I managed to get some, what I think are very nice portraits of them that are completely isolated from anything and everyone else, so that you would have no idea what was happening.
I'm proud of you.
Well, I got myself in there,
You passed.
No, you did. But it was like, it's an opportunity to work with free talent. It's
that's how I felt. And also a chance to be around you, because when I saw it, I always look at these Leica things, and then I looked at your work, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to this thing, So I planned my day around it, and it's not something I typically do. I'm like a little bit, I'm actually shy for those kinds of things, and and going by myself and the whole thing.
Me too.
and I remember coming home and even talking to my wife, and she's like, aren't you glad you went? And I'm like, yes, I had such a good time. So,
well,
Did you meet any friends?
Yeah. Make any friends today, Adam?
Oh my God, I have a play date next week.
I got so much positive feedback from that. We're setting up another one as soon as we can. This may be at Photoville, maybe this, if there is one, but
let's hope so.
At some point, I mean, I really get a lot out of these workshops. Usually I'm doing them about merging art and commerce and trying to figure out who you are
right
photographer and, blowing it all up, and things that I've learned over my career. I've had 4 or 5 careers, and I've learned the hard way that you have to reinvent and challenge yourself creatively, or you just die inside. You get into a rut. And this is the key to any creative longevity. If you look at it over, like if you were 20 years old and you thought about your career, there are decisions you can make right now that would increase your odds that you're going to have a fulfilling, satisfying, and creatively challenging life in photography or directing, if you make the right decisions now by defining who you truly are, what truly turns you on as a photographer or a director, what satisfies you. That's the thing that gets us into this. And then we forget about it when we start trying to make a living, and we crush that part. And so I try to teach that and how to replenish that. And then the street photography thing is just my soul going back to being a kid.
Yeah.
I don't do it like, I was amazed. I wanted to ask you guys about this explosion of street photography because of Instagram, I think it really is strictly because of Instagram.
Yeah.
And not only the explosion of street photography, but the sort of approach to street photography that is just so incredibly brilliant, where people are scoping out a spot and they are looking at light, they're paying attention, and they're getting these incongruous compositions just randomly, but because they're paying the price to put themselves in that picture, to be able to capture that moment. It's not setting up, but it's watching and waiting, or they're grabbing it on the street like Gary Winogrand. But I have always been more like trying to be Winogrand or Elliot Erwitt or Corey Besson and just be lucky. But now I'm starting to think, from watching Instagram, I should plan these out. I don't do that. I should really start planning. I should start scouting and planning. I do that for my shoots, my document, but I don't do it for street. But I feel like I'm learning from this whole new generation of street photographers and a new way to think about it.
Definitely.
And the work stands on its own. It's just tremendous work. So
yeah,
I think whatever the inspiration is for this new generation of, and I'll put myself in that category. It's especially for people that are starting out with photography. There's always something to shoot. When I was starting out, I would walk around. I'd walk around the city for hours, and I would just find the singers on the corner in Soho that were singing all day and take photos of them. And, if you go on a hiking trail, what you could take nature photos, but people photos, and whether they're doing it for the likes on Instagram, or they're doing it because it makes them feel good about themselves, or makes them a better photographer, or I hear a lot of, seasoned photographers like yourself will do it to sort of re-energize themselves and center themselves and get back to where it started or where their passion lies. It's, and I love about street photography are the different photographers' approaches to getting the photograph.
Yeah.
Some will have their M6 and a 28 and a flash and just be in your face.
Hey, practice makes perfect.
That's their style. Others are more laid back, and you have to work with the personality of yourself. And
well, I think that's right. And I think what's good about Instagram, what I like about it, first of all, I'm a very private person. I've had to learn how to put myself out there, and you have to market yourself to get jobs and all that. But when I was doing newspapers and magazines, I got used to this demand of publishing. So Instagram reminds me of publishing, and it's a combination of that plus a blog. And I found that I really enjoy engaging. I so enjoy this, especially when people engage and write about their own lives or their own experience to what I posted. I get direct messages all the time, interesting stuff. And some of the people who follow me show up in my workshops, or they come to my exhibits. I just had one in Washington, D.C. that, I think 3 or 4 people came up and said, and I remembered them once I realized who they were. But, that's interesting how the digital realm that can be very negative becomes very positive in real life, IRL. So I started out being very wary of being public and putting stuff out there. And now I just look at it as like, it's my zine, it's my blog kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a discipline also, which is hard to do all the time. And people apply a high standard to you.
And I think that part of the thing to take away from that is to post things for yourself. Don't shoot for other people. Don't shoot for likes. Don't shoot for any of that other stuff.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
And back to the
Shoot
whole
for yourself, but do you post for yourself?
You have to, because
yeah.
you'll never have longevity. It'll always be about some mood of some zeitgeist. If you want longevity, you have to be willing to go through the trials and the peaks. But you have to be true to yourself. That's the hardest thing, is to say no to stuff that makes you sick to your stomach, where you feel obligated. Right. That's the key lesson. No is the most powerful word in the English language. Do I post sometimes just because I feel like, oh, this will be interesting? Yeah, but most of the time I'm trying to figure out what I like the most, because this is the process I'm always going through. What am I about? And those pictures that I love the most always get the least likes.
Of course.
They always do. And I love that, because it reminds me, you're not for everybody. You're not going to be for everybody.
I could post something that I think is so visually interesting, and the light is just perfect, and the symmetry, and blah, 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 blah.
But it's just wheatgrass.
Then I post a fucking sunset, and everyone's like, oh my God. It's like, so yeah, look, people like what they know.
There's a time for good color sunsets. There's a time when you're in the mood for that.
Well, think about it. Like comedians, they run their material, they'll, whatever, before they do their HBO special or their live show. It's the same thing. Like Instagram for us is a visual diary where we can do whatever. It's a blank slate. It's a canvas. Some people curate the shit out of their Instagram. Some people vomit on their Instagram. Some people consistently put up whatever. There's no rules. It's just there. We can do whatever we want with it. And that's so much fun. And I love looking at other people's work and getting excited, and then meeting, people. And I am so in love with Instagram. I think it's so much fun as a photographer. And
I learned my lesson. I was critical of it early on, and a lot of my digital Silicon Valley friends really got mad at me, because I was mad that it had to be a square.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's fascist. A small group of people dictating to a large group. It was like an incomplete understanding of what we do as photographers.
You're cropping my work?
To force that to happen, it wasn't, I was so upset about that. But once they open it up to a rectangle, it still forces you to fix your verticals. I mean, it won't automatically take whatever you put in the vertical space.
Well,
somebody has to write that code. Somebody has to write the code. Sit down and write the code, please.
I use an app called Square Ready, and it takes the image, and so the whole image is shown, and it puts like a little border around it. And I like the look of that, because it kind of almost acts like a little bit of a mat.
I grew up with that.
Right, me too.
The lights Valois 2 Enlarger had a black line around the image. That's what Cartier-Bresson and all those guys used to use.
Well, I wish that I could do the black line thing, and I could, obviously, if I want to take the time and put a border around.
That's what I think about a lot during the day right now. Is how do I get that border?
How do I get it without destroying my film slide?
You get the lights Valois 2 Enlarger. It's already, people used to take the Besslers and file them out.
Yeah.
In art school.
What do you mean like that? I filed the shit out of that. Destroyed it.
Yeah. Oh, you dude, you totally destroyed that.
See that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one way to do it.
Why not? Yeah, I used to love doing that with the enlarger.
It's not the good way to do it though. I wasn't patient enough.
Exactly. Whatever works.
Whatever works. We have no rules. No rules.
None. No, it's fair game.
Dude, that's cool.
All right. Well, look, we're at the 2-hour mark. Maybe it's time to actually 2:15 since we started. You want to wrap this thing up? You guys feel
I got to
good?
go back to. I'm seeing emails come through from my agent, and I got to eat something.
I like that. Yeah, I got to call my girl.
Hollywood. Just
dude, we haven't worked in months. I might have a job.
No, it's amazing.
I gotta fucking
don't give me any shit for this.
No, I'm like, like I said, I literally just had to send out a bid this week, and I'm like, holy shit, people want to really do real stuff. So that's awesome.
I think it's coming back.
So I'm excited.
Somehow.
And so
thank you, Doug.
Yes, Doug, you are the man. It is such I'm like I've got a ear to ear smile on. I just can't stop. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh my God, it's my honor. You guys are the best. I feel like this was the best podcast. It reminded me of so many things I'm forgetting about. So thank you guys. And I hope we can do this in person sometime soon over a beer. But thank you for having me on. I'm definitely thrilled to be here. Awesome.
And with that, that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe. Actually, I'm going to dial that back. Definitely follow Doug on Instagram. Okay, I'm going to put the links below. Just go there now, but I'll put them in there anyway. You got to look at the guy's work. It's so great. Subscribe to the podcast, please. It's wherever podcasts are found. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow Daniel as well. His work is absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. If you've made it this far for listening, we really appreciate that. That's it for now, and we'll see you soon.
That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you guys.
Doug.
I'll talk to you soon.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.